gosh, what a question. Is your vote working for you? It depends on whether or not you're on the winning side. What did the researchers find?
That's certainly right, Stephen. And of course, we know that the IEC is indeed preparing for the 2024 elections. And of course, if anything is to go by, we saw just last year in the 2021 local government elections that we saw a major decrease when it comes to voter turnout. But most importantly, Stephen, it is the issue around answering why are not young people going out to vote in their numbers. So this is something that the HSRC conducted the research, and along with other stakeholders as well. And basically just trying to show South Africa from the dawn of democracy and where we find ourselves now with a number of political parties on the ballot paper. Why are we not seeing more people going to the polls and going out to vote in their numbers, Stephen? So it was quite significant to see, in terms of where, the voter trends are in South Africa. Let's take a listen to what one of the researchers told us, speaking to them earlier on.
We've obviously looked in partnership with the Electoral Commission at long-term trends in several things. One is democratic attitudes, both in terms of the demand for democracy, views on performance of democracy. We secondly have looked at electoral attitudes and how those are changing over time, over the better part of 2 decades. And also we've tried to reflect on what does that mean for electoral behaviour, the decisions that people make around whether or not to turn out in any particular election cycle. I wouldn't say it's necessarily apathy. It is a general, people feel very strongly about democracy in elections, but the question is more about a sort of broader disillusionment that seems to have increasingly characterized the voting age public. We've seen, for instance, that satisfaction with democracy has dropped dramatically, as has trust in a range of core political institutions. On the electoral front, we're seeing the duty to vote has typically been very high. It remains high, but has started to drop in the last 5 to 7 years. And importantly, it's also related to what we call political efficacy. Do I feel my vote makes a difference? Do I feel that the elected officials are acting in the interests and needs of the public? And in those 2 cases in particular, we've seen a very negative view come through over time, over the last 10 years in particular. And that really matters very significantly for people's decisions to want to turn out in an election.
And Mbali, I'm sure the research around the difference in ages, younger people versus older people, is fascinating. Everyone gets really worried about young people not voting in South Africa. Let me be old, grumpy and unpopular for just a minute and suggest that, I don't know if we're different from other places. That's what happens everywhere else.
That's certainly right. And I mean, we're also following that trend. More young people are not turning out to vote. And Stephen, we saw this even last year. But one thing that the IEC has noted, even in the past, and they're saying that they need now to look into the education around, making sure that people go out and vote in their numbers, Stephen. But at the same time, when it comes to young people, more people have the access to a number of political parties. You would also know, Stephen, that the trends of joblessness among young people is on the rise. We have a very high unemployment rate. So when you look at the voters, especially young people, if they do vote, what essentially are they voting for if we see more young people out in the streets? So that's essentially also some of the things you need to look into where you're seeing more young people not turning out to vote. But really, in terms of their lives, has their lives changed for the better? So this is why we're seeing such voter trends.
There's so much to look at it there, isn't there? Mbali, Thethani, do appreciate it, our political reporter, looking at that story. There's a lot to talk about why people vote and why they don't.